The Witchfinder by Frederick Cowles. The wind howled mournfully and the cold rain lashed the solitary rider, whose weary horse stumbled along the muddy road. The night was dark and the man could hardly see a yard before him, but with an impatient word he urged his tired nag onwards. At a shadowed corner something clanked dolefully, and the horse reared as a shapeless mass swung out over the road. The rider drew rein with a startled exclamation, and then chuckled as he realized he had reached Caxton Gibbet. He lifted his hat in mocking salutation, and in a thin, reedy voice cried out, "Is it thou, old Mother Lane? How doth it feel to be so high up in the world?" "And is it thou, Master Hugh Murray, Witchfinder of East Anglia, Justice of the Peace, and Murderer of Women?" a hoarse voice answered him. Master Hugh almost tumbled from his horse in fright. His hair literally stood on end, and he trembled as though he had ague. With an effort he made to dig spurs into his mount, but before he could do so, a figure leapt from beneath the gibbet and seized the mare's bridle. "God's soul!" screamed the witchfinder. "Who art thou?" "Anthony Lane," the low voice replied, "son of the poor creature who hangs on yonder tree, and grandson of that Margaret Bell whom thou didst burn a year ago." "Unhand me, fool," ordered the man, recovering himself. "Loosen the bridle, or it will fare hardly with thee." "When I've delivered my message, Master Hugh, I give thee greetings from the dead, and the promise that all the torments they experienced, thou also shalt know." With a muttered curse, Hugh Murray raised his whip to strike the youth who dared threaten him, but the fellow dropped the bridle and vanished into the night. His laughter, weird and mocking, died away in the distance as the infuriated Justice drove spurs into his horse's flanks and galloped on. Soon he came to a crossroad and paused to decide which path to take. It was still some miles to Cambridge, and in such a storm he had small hope of arriving there before the early hours of the morning. There was the direct way through Grantchester, which would mean a ride through the Cambridge main street to get to his inn near Magdalen Bridge. The other road, crossing Madingley Hill, necessitated a slight detour, but would bring him into the town almost at the door of a hostelry, where he intended to lodge. On the whole, it would be better to take the Madingley road. He was not popular in Cambridge, and had no desire to risk an encounter with the townspeople or scholars who might recognise him. Hugh Murray turned his horse's head to the left, and rode on through the night. He recalled with a shudder how a Cambridge mob had once pelted him with garbage and broken his head, and all because he'd gone there hunting witches in the name of His Majesty James of England. It was not as if he were an ordinary witchfinder, like the fellow Hopkins. He, Hugh Murray, was a man of property, Justice of the Peace, and in high favour at the court. Witch-hunting was his hobby, and he was determined to use every means to exterminate the foul brood of witches and warlocks from the counties of East Anglia. The road was bleak, with no village for miles, although he did see the lights of Childerley in the distance as he joined the main highway. The storm increased in fury. Master Hugh was already soaked to the skin, and his horse was in a sorry plight. The gentle slope of Madingley Hill was before him, but the nag could hardly stumble onwards. The witchfinder looked for some place where he could shelter until the storm abated. Thick woods lined the road, but the trees afforded no protection. With a groan, he dismounted, and resigned himself to climbing the hill on foot. It was then he saw a cottage amongst the trees. A narrow path led up to it, but the window showed no light, and the house appeared to be deserted. He knocked on the door with his riding crop, but a hollow echo was the only reply. He knocked louder, and this time thought he heard the sound of someone moving within. After an interval of some seconds the door opened slowly, and a white face peered out at him. It was the countenance of an old woman, lined and wrinkled, and vaguely familiar. Before he could utter a word, the hag addressed him in a cracked, wheedling voice. "Come inside, Master Hugh Murray, come inside, my bonny witchfinder. Here is shelter for thee." Without pausing to inquire how the woman knew his name, the man tied his horse to the branch of a tree and entered the cottage. A peat fire was burning on the hearth, but no lamp or candle illuminated the hovel. "All we can offer your honour is a bed," the cracked voice whispered. "Just a bed to stretch your limbs upon." "To stretch your limbs?" A cold hand grasped his arm and led him across the room towards a low couch, which was dimly visible in the firelight. He removed his saturated coat and flung himself down upon the bed. It was very hard, just a wide board with no mattress, but the witch-finder was tired, and even such a primitive resting place was welcome. He stretched his limbs and closed his eyes. The sound of soft laughter disturbed him. He endeavoured to raise his head, and so became aware of the fact that, in some mysterious manner, he had become fastened to the bed. His feet and hands were secured by ropes, and his body spread-eagled in a most uncomfortable way. And then he realized that it was no bed he was stretched upon, but the rack of torture. Master Hugh licked his lips and voiced a protest. "What is the meaning of this foolery?" he cried. "Not foolery, my brave witch-finder," answered the woman who had admitted him to the cottage. "Surely it is not foolery when Master Hugh Murray hath himself shown how usefully this instrument may be employed." The hag laughed, and another joined in the mirth. There were two of them bending over him. He saw their white faces, their cruel eyes, their grey elfin locks. "Who art thou?" he cried, "and what damnable mummery is this?" "Softly, softly, Master Hugh," came the reply. "Little did you think to meet us again. I am that Alice Lane whose broken body yet hangs upon Caxton gibbet. With me is my mother Margaret Bell, whom thou didst condemn to the fire a year ago this very day." A cold sweat bathed the witch-finder's body. His lips essayed to mutter a prayer. "Ay, pray, but it will avail thee naught," went on the lifeless voice. "The tortures we knew, thou also shalt experience. Death shall come slowly, even as it came to us." "He pricked me all over to find the witch mark," said the other voice. The man felt cold hands loosen his clothes and expose his body. Then a pin was driven into his chest and another into his leg. He screamed and twisted in agony, but his torturers only withdrew the pins and inserted them in other places. "Are the pincers hot?" the first voice inquired. "He drew my teeth with red-hot pincers, drew them one by one until the flesh was burnt from my gums and my tongue but a charred stump." "Mercy, mercy!" cried the victim. "Have mercy, I implore you." "Hast thou ever shown mercy?" asked the tired old voice. He saw the glow of hot pincers and felt his mouth forced open. Then came the scorching pain as they touched his gums. The red-hot instrument tore at his teeth and dragged them from his jaws. His mouth was a well of fire, searing his throat and stinging his eyes. Warm blood spurted over his chest, and he was conscious of the reek of burning flesh. Another tooth was drawn, and then he fainted. Cold water splashing on his face revived him, and he tried to articulate another plea for mercy, but his tongue was burnt to the roots. He strained weakly at his bonds and writhed on the wooden frame. "Daughter," croaked the elder woman, "he put needles under the nails of my fingers and toes. Hot needles." "He shall also know the agony of the needles," was the reply. Master Hugh felt cold hands grip his fingers, and then the excruciating pain of a glowing needle being driven under a nail. He sobbed and twisted his body. Then another needle was forced beneath one of his toenails. He prayed for death to release him from his torment. "Mother, he had my nails torn from my fingers." "Tear his nails, daughter. Here are the pincers. Break and tear his hands even as he tore thine." The tortured wretch, almost unconscious with pain, felt the instrument grip a nail, and then it seemed that the whole tip of a finger was torn away. He tried to scream, but no sound issued from his bleeding mouth. The elder woman spoke again. "When I reproached him with my eyes, he ordered hot coals to be laid upon them." Dimly he was aware of smouldering embers burning into his head, into his brain. Surely this must be the end. He could endure no more. And then, with a creaking and groaning, the rollers of the rack began to turn. His body was stretched until the joints were dislocated. With a gasp of agony, Hugh Murray died, and the last sound he heard was the hellish laughter of the women he had tortured and killed. A farmer driving into Cambridge in the early hours of the morning noticed the horse tethered to a tree near the cottage. Being an inquisitive fellow, he entered the building and discovered the witch-finder's body lying on the bed. Master Murray's face was twisted into a horrible grimace, but he seemed to have died a natural death. for there were no signs of violence on the body. Only the people of Madingley noted the curious fact that Hugh Murray had died in the cottage formerly inhabited by two of the notorious witches he'd condemned to death, Margaret Bell and her daughter, Alice Lane.